So, ladies and gentlemen, before I invite the panelists on stage, let me introduce you to the book that we are now going to be talking about. So, our sixth session is around Borders Battlers by Michael Sexton. Ladies and gentlemen, in Borders Battlers, Michael Sexton details the historic tide test of Madras. The Australian team returned to Madras the next year to launch a winning World Cup campaign as rank outsiders. It's the 1986 tour of India, and Australian cricket is reeling from the loss of key players to retirement and rebel tours. Few give Australia a chance against a surging India, and what follows is one of the most titanic struggles in cricket history. Played in oppressive heat and humidity, the first test in Madras, now Chennai of course, swung like a pendulum. The controversial final ball forced a tie for only the second time in test history, and I'm sure everybody is aware of that. We are very fortunate to have with us Michael Sexton, who's going to discuss how he pieced the book together and what it took to put this entire historic test match in the form of this book. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Sexton is a journalist with more than 30 years of experience in Australia and abroad, and he's worked in news, current affairs, and documentary. His interest in Australian rules football has seen him get more than 8 media awards for excellence, and I request you all to please put your hands together for Michael Sexton. On the panel, we have the former umpire Vikram Raju. May I request, sir, to please join us on stage. So he's the gentleman who gave Maninder Singh out LBW. He faced a lot of flack for that decision. Some Indian players questioned him, but he remained resolute. It is another matter that Vikram Raju never figured in a test match again, and I'm sure he would love to share with us his experience of that time. On the panel also is a well-known former Indian opener and current coach of the Indian women's team, W.V. Raman. Please put your hands together, everybody. W.V. has played key roles such as a coach for Tamil Nadu, Bengal, assistant coach of Kings 11 Punjab, and then batting coach of the Kolkata Knight Riders. Later on, he was appointed by the BCCI to the coaching panel as the batting coach at the National Cricket Academy in Bengaluru. And I'm sure you all know Arup. I request our moderator for the session, Arup Ghosh, to please join us. He's been associated in top brands like Times of India, Hindustan Times, NDTV, Z, launched Sahara Samay and NewsX, and is now the CEO and co-founder of N1 Media. He's also had a chat show called Silly Point that we've all heard about. And he's also been the co-producer of Bat Chat, another exciting show. And I now request Arup to please take over this very exciting session.
Thank you very much. Very good evening to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. This is about Michael Sexton, who's here. He's come down from Adelaide. He's written a book on the famous tide test of Madras. And that happened in '86, and it is a historic test match. I, as a teenager, saw that match. Many of you would have, hopefully. But it has gone down in history as one of the greatest games ever played between India and Australia. I can say I've read every page of Michael's book. It's a terrific read. It's like a thriller, and it's a very difficult art to do because this is a match which has happened. We know what the result has been, who are the main players, but yet to sequence the whole thing together, to put in his own research, talk to some of the main players is terrific. So let me begin with Michael, and I want to know from him what was the main trigger for writing the book, and how did he feel when he finished the first draft? Michael.
Well, thank you very much. And, it's a thrill to be sitting by the umpire too, who some living history with us with this today.
Vikram Raj.
I wanted to revisit the match because it's such a significant and important game for Australia in the first instance.
Yes.
There's only ever been 2 tide tests, so that story
one.
itself is important to tell. But what I wanted to do was to revisit it 20, 30 years later and put it into its context and what the game meant to the people involved and what it meant to Australian and Indian cricket. And we see matches come and go so often now. Shorter and shorter formats of the game, and they're sort of almost consumables that come and go. But the tide test had something which really anchored particularly Australian cricket. Australian cricket came into it. Australian cricket was on its knees. Allan Border was really at his wit's end, whether or not he even wanted to become captain of Australia anymore. He had a very, very young team with him. And they fought this incredible 5-day match. It comes down to the second last ball in very, very difficult conditions against a brilliant Indian team. Kapil Dev, Sunny Gavaskar. You know, the players that India had were so good. And in a sense, neither team won. But for Australia, my theory is that it helped set up what became a golden era for the team. India was a team that played with that spirit of Kapil Dev, that anything is possible. And yet Australia came in the spirit of their captain, which was, please, can we not lose another match? That's how desperate they were. And the drama played out, and it was nice to revisit it, and it was nice to speak to the people involved and to see, as the years have passed, how the game, their concept of the game and how it fits together in their lives was a little bit more obvious. So it was a great chance to go back and visit it. I learned a lot from it, and I hope that it takes the reader back to the game, but it perhaps shows the game through fresh eyes.
Michael, my second question to you is something which you've mentioned in the book, and we in India always thought about it on those same lines. It was a tight test, but somehow or the other, the way Australia celebrated, it seemed as if they had won the test match and India had lost the test match. The body language was subdued. Ravi Shastri and Maninder, who were at the crease, they were highly dejected, and a lot of other things followed. Umpire Vikram Raju is here, who officiated in that test match, a historic test match. I'll come to him, but I want to know from you is that when you were talking to so many of the main players, what was the thought process between the Australians and the Indians?
I don't think there's any question that the Australians felt the tie was a win for them. And I think India felt the tie was a loss. I think that's probably generally considered the way it was. I think that photograph which we used on the cover, taken by Mala Mukherjee, if ever there was a photograph that told 1,000 words, that's it. Every single player in that photograph almost has a different emotion. Greg Matthews looks like a Messerschmitt plane flying off in celebration. Yes. Ravi Shastri doesn't even turn his back. He doesn't even think that it's happened yet. And look at Allan Border. He looks like a man who's lost. And he's actually been searching for the ball, because in the moment he's not sure what's happened. Now the question is, when you look at that, and of course the umpires have no question at all what's happened. That finger is right up. Yes. So the decision is made. I've often wondered if Allan Border, what would have happened to Allan Border if that had been given not out and that match had been won by India. Whether he would have continued to be captain of Australia, whether or not Australia would have built. And don't forget, he was the first Australian to go past 10,000 runs. The Allan Border medal now is struck for the best male player in Australian cricket. As Gideon Haigh said, he's the man who stood by Australia in its darkest hour. And yet it comes down to almost those 1 or 2 balls of what could have happened to his life and his career. Not many times that a sportsman's career would perhaps turn on that moment. Similarly for India, you know, had they won that test match, they had just beaten England 2-0, could have been 3. They were the defending World Cup champions. And if we get a minute, we'll talk about the 87 World Cup and the impact this game had on that. It's just that moment and that drama that's only sport seems to bring up. And I think, as I said, I think that probably the Australians felt they won even though the match was a tie.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'll now talk to former umpire, international umpire Vikram Raju. He officiated in that test match with Dara Dotiwala, who has now passed away. Umpire Vikram Raju's name has gone into the history of Indian cricket as having officiated a very historic test match, the second tight test in world cricket history. He was under enormous pressure in that final over. When he gave Maninder Singh out, there were many who felt that it was a wrong decision. Umpire Vikram Raju always said later it was the correct decision. Ravi Shastri later went into the umpire's room, said a few words. What he said, we'll ask umpire Vikram Raju. But before that, sir, take us through that last over. What was going on in your mind under that enormous pressure when that final over started by Greg Matthews?
See, Greg Matthews, when he started, we never felt things go like that. But actually Ravi Shastri, when he was playing, he scored a 6 and then took a single on the 4th ball. And if we had stayed there, it would have been a different decision, different things. No, tie match would have been a winning match or a draw also. And see, and everybody says umpire's decision is not correct, but still, see, even the commentators, Jai Sima and all these people who was on the watching the match, they said before the last over started, this match going to be a draw or a tie. See, this is how things, and because I didn't know what he was talking, but when the decision was given, everybody was happy, and because the match would have been won. That's what Ravi Shastri and our spectators are also thinking. But actually, it was not that. But what the decision I have given is definitely perfect. Bat did not come near the ball, and he was covering the wicket. So naturally, I have to give. I am not to favor any team.
So let's recap that historic moment. The moment Greg Matthews bowled that delivery to Maninder Singh tried to sweep, correct? And he missed. And you felt that it would be hitting middle off leg which stick?
Yes, middle stump only. See, he played straight and he wanted to take the single. As far as possible, he wanted to cross the score so that India can win. But it was not like that. He didn't, bat did not come near the ball. So I was to give a decision, and I gave the decision.
So there are many umpires now who came after you. For example, Steve Bucknor, known as Slow Death because he would take forever to raise his finger if the umpire was out. WE knows more about him than anyone else. What I want to know from you is that Maninder Singh went on record saying that why did umpire Vikram Raju immediately shoot his finger up? Was that confidence? You knew what you were doing?
No, see, when the decision was perfect, how can I stop the decision? I have to raise the finger. And otherwise, everybody would have been said, if he has not given the out, we would have won. How do you know whether you have win the match or not? But whatever decision I have given is definitely correct. I cannot argue with anybody. See, even so far I have met Maninder Singh, no day he has told about the decision. Of course, in the papers, whatever they say, first they said it's a tie match. And afterwards, Ravi Shastri said in so many magazines it has come. Umpire Vikram Raju gave a decision. But actually, later on, every year, September 18th, they are giving the news that the tie test match was a perfect match. See how these people say.
Okay, so I'll come back to you. WB, that match had huge consequences, as Michael is also saying. The Aussies always felt they had won it. We felt that we were done in for any reason. You, as a frontline player later, what did you think, what was the impact on Indian cricket and what international ramifications it had for umpiring decisions?
I think more than what happened or what was thought of in the Indian dressing room, I think that was a big booster for the Aussie side because that was a young side. Border was trying to battle hard on his own and carry a young team along. And with the World Cup slotted in India in '87, this particular result gave them a lot of confidence. When they came back, they came with the confidence that we could do as we planned. Because winning a test match or getting a test match to be tied is not easy, especially if you look at the scorecard and the way the game panned out when the top three were batting. It was almost sort of a done deal for India, but then they fought hard. They took it to the last over. The match ended in a tie. It made a huge difference for the fortunes of Australia and also for Allan Border's legacy as a captain.
Where umpiring is concerned, you've played county cricket. There is a lot of discussion which went on in English cricket saying that probably the best umpires in the 70s and the 80s were from England and the subcontinent umpires weren't really all that good. There was a lot of pressure on them. They made a lot of errors. That was the perception. Of course, the Kiwis were equally to blame, they said. What, in your opinion, happened then? And what were the triggers that went in to bring in neutral umpires?
See, the very fact that a lot of cricket is played over a period of 5 months in England gives the umpires a lot of matches to umpire. As in any profession, the more you do, the better you get, which meant the umpires in England had a huge advantage of umpiring continuously day in and day out for 6 months, 5 to 6 months. As far as the Indian umpires were concerned, it's not that they were not good. It's just that perhaps the assessment which was done then was probably not right. A brave decision was not rewarded when the appraisals were made or when the umpires were reviewed. I think that is changed over a period of time in the way the umpires are assessed in Indian cricket. As regards the neutral umpires coming in, I think it is perhaps Imran Khan who was always batting for it because he was hurt. His pride was hurt when people would say that, in Pakistan it's impossible for a visiting side to win. Incidentally, what happened was the first set of neutral umpires officiated in a test match between India and Pakistan when Chika led that series in '89. And it's worked out well. With technology coming in, of course, there will be a lot of talk going on about umpiring decisions. And in as much as you can try and get it close to foolproof, it's not going to happen. There's always going to be something or other that's happening, something that may not be right. It's again a perception. And of course, let's face it, what's cricket without, a couple of decisions not going here and there? What do you have to talk about?
A quick one, just in case I miss the thread later. WB, I want to ask you that, in your opinion, like Ricky Ponting is now saying that for the Ashes, the local umpires should be brought back. We are missing, there are too many mistakes being made, and this experiment has not really worked. Do you think it is time to sort of rework the model, or are you happy with it?
As long as you're the best people umpiring, I'm fine with it. It should not be restricted, or it should not be sort of, couched as X is better, or foreign umpires or local umpires. I think we shouldn't talk about the nationality of the umpires. I think the best people, even if they happen to be from home, in a home series, it's fine by me. At the end of the day, what you want to see is good decisions made on the field. And regardless of where an umpire hails from, I think, you should encourage good umpires.
Michael Sexton, coming back to you, in the book, you have devoted a lot of time to a man called Dean Jones, who has achieved legendary status later, who is now known as Professor Dino, become quite a bit of a comedian. But at the same time, I saw him recently giving a demo on how to play the art of spin and how he would walk down. That was brilliant. What I want to know is that defining innings of his, the 200 plus that he did, and within quotes almost died because of dehydration, because of the heat, because of the humidity. And you spend a lot of time building up the heat of Chennai. Don't forget you have WV here who is from Chennai, so he's going to nail you. And at the same time, you talk about the fact that not enough attention was given there for rehydration. All of that came later. While talking to Dino, what did he say to you? Did he feel at some point he could have died?
He was very, very unwell. Yeah, there's no question about that. He was very ill. And it wasn't only the Australians who were, and for those unfamiliar with the story, Dino batted for the best part of 8 hours over 2 days in stifling heat and humidity. He's from Victoria, so he's not used to that humidity. He's used to dry heat. And there is a famous moment, of course, which I'm sure you know, where he's batting with Allan Border, and Dino has played a couple of test matches for Australia in the West Indies and not gone very well. And he was dropped from the test team and he became a specialist one-day batsman, probably the first specialist one-day player that Australia had, which he didn't like. And he really craved to be back in the test side. And when they came to India, the number 3 spot was up for grabs between he and Michael Valletta, and they were sharing a room. And the night before the test match, Allan Border called Dean Jones into his room and he said, "You're the number 3 for the entire series. Think about the other number 3s who played for Australia." So suddenly Bradman and Ian Chappell's in his head. And he said, this is what I want you to do. It's the first time he felt good about himself and his captain. So he doesn't want to let him down. So he's batting and batting. And he reaches the point where he is so dehydrated and he's so unwell that he starts to lose control of his bodily functions, which is pretty unhappy. So he's vomiting, he's urinating. And he says to Allan Border, "I have to go off. I can't play in these conditions." And Allan Border says to him quite cruelly, he says, "If you go off, I'll get a real Australian out here." Very hard thing to say. And he says, I'll get a Queenslander out here. Allan Border was playing for Queensland at the time, and that got his hackles up. So he kept playing. And he reached the point where, and in many respects there's an argument about whether or not it was a Pyrrhic victory, because he was so debilitated that he would hit a ball that they could run two, but they're only walking through for one because that's all he could manage. In the end, he's finally out for more than 200. He staggers back to the rooms. He collapses in the rooms. His body starts cramping up. The team physiotherapist can't cool him down. He puts him in a bath of ice, and finally they call an ambulance to take him to hospital. And when Allan Border comes off at the end of the day's play, he famously says, where's Jones? And they said, he's in hospital. He said, right, have I killed him? So he really was very unwell. But the interesting part was that Errol Alcott, who was the Australian physiotherapist, had not had a cricket background. He'd been a rugby league person. And he decided that on this tour he would begin documenting for the first time the dehydration and the toll it took. So he used to weigh all the players with all their gear before they went out. Then we would weigh them afterwards, and he used to write it in his book, and he wrote down temperature. It's all very basic stuff. But the biggest problem they found at the time was they couldn't get the water that they felt they needed. So they were getting delivered a lot of soft drink and mineral water and so forth, and it wasn't helping. When Dean Jones was batting, Gavaskar and Kapil Dev on the field, particularly Gavaskar in the slips, was saying, let's stop the game, try this, and he'd vomit, and he said, try that. So, everyone was very concerned about him. Now, he did actually go back to the team hotel that night, and he continued playing the match. But I think it was an interesting time because Errol Alcott was having arguments with Bob Simpson, who was the coach. And Alcott was looking at Jones out there, and he looked like a puppet on a string, like he'd lost all form. And he said, I think that he lost 7 kilos in weight in one day. And he looked at him, he said, we've got to get this guy off. And Bob Simpson was, look, let's just see how much, let's keep him going. Again, remembering that Australia was so desperate for a good result. So it was an interesting collision where for the first time you kind of had sports science saying, are we pushing these guys too far? But the old mentality of, I want a real Australian out here, I want someone who can tough it out, was still in play. So it was an interesting divide. But the good news is that Jones survived.
Yeah, Michael, there's another point. The Aussie players are very used to extreme heat.
Yes.
And they play in those conditions. So what was so daunting about Chennai or Madras then?
It was the humidity that was getting to them. That's what they felt. It was just a different type of heat, and they weren't used. And I think they weren't the only players who suffered in that heat. I'm sure that others who played at Chennai would say the same thing, that it's a very difficult ground. I think the configuration of the old ground, it was a concrete stadium. There was a lot of reflective heat, and it had that smell as well from the Buckingham Canal that came in that upset the players as well. So it was, for those who were there, it was a very testing place, and no greater test for 5 days.
WB, you want to comment on this? The heat and the humidity and the conditions?
It's always been challenging in Chennai, and as he rightly said, the structure in the whole stadium was full of concrete, and between lunch and tea was always very, very tough. And the visitors, even if they happen to be from within India, they would find it very difficult. So it is not surprising that Dean Jones went through what he went through.
Mr. Vikram Raju, sir, when Dean Jones was throwing up and all of that was happening, did the umpires feel at any given point in time that you should intervene, you and your co-umpire, and try and stop the play or intervene, or you felt that there was too much pressure from Allan Border?
No. Allan Border did not say anything, but because of the weather conditions and Dean Jones, he was vomiting, so he has to accept to stop the game immediately, and at least Dean Jones can go to the dressing room and take rest. That's what he decided. But in the meanwhile, he was vomiting inside the pavilion also. So he took him to hospital, and next day morning he came. He was fit enough to play the game. See, that is, though Border thought it was very hot, and it may not be possible to continue, but still, next day morning when he came, everything was quite normal, and he was also playing regular as he was playing previous day. So Allan Border could not say anything to stop the game, or ask Dean Jones to come back. So match continued.
So at that point in time, you were our frontline, one of our frontline umpires. You had umpired with Pilu Reporter, with Dotiwala. And you were around 51 or 52 years of age. After that match, you never umpired again. I want to know from you, was it a political decision? Were there certain forces who were against you? Did you pay a price for that decision? What did you think?
No, that is not political. And see, umpiring posting is done by the officials of the board. And whatever they feel, they have done it. But I cannot ask them to, why you are not posting me? How can I ask? See, they think I have taken a decision for the tie test, but not to see. They think they want to win the match, but I have spoiled that. But if they think like that, what can I do? See, it's on the field. Whatever decision I have to give, I have given. And even Jaisima and all these people who are commenting, who are in the television, they said this match would be a draw or a tie. Why they are telling that?
So maybe what I'm going to ask you may sound a bit harsh or insensitive, but I have to ask you this, that whatever decision you gave, according to you, was absolutely the correct decision. You did not umpire again in an international match. Did you ever, as a human being, feel that they weren't fair to me?
That I cannot say anything. But afterwards I did one-day matches, but not the test. One-day international I did. But they only posted. Only for the test match, they didn't post.
Michael mentions in his book that later when you went overseas and Greg Matthews saw you and he came and hugged you, did you get the same love and warmth from the Indians?
See, if they don't give, what to do? I cannot ask them to favor me.
Greg Matthews called him the bravest umpire.
No, Greg Matthews, John Wright, all those people who were who came for the David Hooks charity match, they hugged me, and they also are thinking that they should play in a good way, and we should not unnecessarily comment on others. And just umpires gave a decision means if everything cannot be favored to the local people, how can I do that? No, they themselves, they said, see, don't worry about that match. That was a tie. It should have been a tie. You have taken a correct decision. That's what they said. But I cannot tell all others for what they said. Why I should tell? See, that whatever decision I have given, they accepted. And even after that match, they did not post me for the test match. It's all right. One-day matches, they only posted me. So why I should go and ask them why you are not posting me for the test match? It's not
Michael,
fair.
you say in your book that
Greg
Matthews wore a jumper.
Yeah.
And you saw him bowl with that in the heat and humidity of Chennai. And speaking to Greg, the message that comes across is that he wanted to basically cock a snook and show some attitude that I don't bother about the heat. He bowled relentlessly. But strangely enough, in recent times, talking about Dino's innings, he doesn't rank it very highly. He says it was like one of the flattest tracks and hey, we should get over with it. Do you agree with that? What does Dino feel?
Yeah, the question was put to Greg Matthews because there was a poll taken about the 50 greatest innings by Australian batsmen in Test cricket. And they got together, commentators, former players, journalists, it was a big panel. So the first two of them went to the Don, and one I think was Stan McCabe, and Dean Jones's innings at Chennai was ranked fourth, the fourth greatest innings. Well, then they asked Greg Matthews, and he said, it's not in my top 50. He said Dean Jones was a 24-year-old, he was fit, it was a flat track, and he didn't rate it. Now that's Greg Matthews because he says exactly what he thinks. There's also there might be a question that Dean Jones and Kapil Dev shared the man of the match. Well, Greg Matthews took 10 wickets. He bowled 39 overs on the final day, to take it. So there's a reasonable question that he may have qualified for that. But his point is that it was a flat track. That was Dino's job. he didn't rate it, but that goes against the opinion of an enormous bulk of Australian cricket commentators and former players. And the question about him wearing a jumper is an extraordinary one, because he did that on the final day in all those conditions, and he asked the 12th man to go and get him a jumper because he wanted to show the Indians that it didn't matter how hot it was, that he could play all day. And the story goes that at one point on the final day, Border came to him to give him a rest, and he wouldn't give the ball back. And he said, no, keep me on from one end. And I think, Monty, you might appreciate that as a spinner, that he had it in his head and he had his end. And in the end, the only rotation Border made was from the other end. Matthews held his end for the entire day. And given that India started the day needing 4 per over to win, they came to the last over of the day, they still needed 4 to win. It was an incredible play that final day, and then the second last ball, the wicket.
WV, need your perspective as a former opening bat who played for India about the big knocks. Now, this double 100 by Dean Jones has created its own controversy, and it's compared to many other, great knocks. But what I want to know from you is that someone like VVS Lakshman hit 281 at Eden Gardens, and India won the match under adverse circumstances, a turnaround thing. Many people don't rate the 300 in Multan by Viru Sehwag. They said he was the king of the flat track, pummels the bowlers all over. Maybe it's highly unfair. But purely as a batsman, as a cricketer, as a coach now, how do you rate the big knocks?
You would, first of all, see what impact it had, a knock. It's not necessarily numerical. If you're going to rate an innings amongst the best, you look at the impact it's made. And then if you're comparing the knock of VVS Lakshman versus Sehwag's 100, obviously you know who the winner is going to be, because India were following on Eden Gardens. They had no glimmer of hope. And I remember the last test was supposed to be in Chennai after Eden Gardens, and people are not bothered to even think of buying a ticket. But when this partnership started building up, and suddenly, slowly, they turned the tables on the Australians in Eden Gardens, and everybody is scrambling for tickets the last day of the Eden Gardens Test match in Chennai. And that's the kind of impact it had. And that also made a turnaround in terms of how we thought about facing a test match. Because that was a test match that we had no business to win, as it panned out in the first 2-3 days. And then when we went on to win that, the entire perception of Indian cricket changed from there on.
So does a knock under adversity, even if it is just 100 compared to a double 100, have much more meaning?
Of course it does, but again, Dean Jones's knock cannot be sort of diluted in any which way or taking into consideration about the nature of the pitch, because one, he was struggling against the elements. If you're battling the conditions or the skills of the opponents, that's fine, but he was battling the elements there, which is alien to him. And also, the fact remains that his double 100 kept Australia ahead in the first half of the test match, without which probably, the numbers would have been different altogether if you had to walk off at a crucial juncture in that innings, because a well-set batsman who's dominating the attack, if he walks off, then the things change on the field. So along those lines, I think, you would have to put that knock somewhere at the top.
Right. Vikram Raju sir, during the course of that match, which Michael chronicles in his book, at one point, Dara Dotiwala and you had a chat with Allan Border because he was slowing down the game. And Dara Dotiwala apparently told Allan Border that if you don't hurry up, we'll send you off. Now, under the rules, was that the right thing to say, and could you have sent him off?
No, because otherwise the light would have been dark. Then how can you continue the match? That's why Dotiwala and myself consulted and told Border to be quick. Otherwise, they would have taken their own time, and match would have been a draw. It would not have been a decision for me, what I have given. Then people would have been, umpires are not taking the chance of asking the fielding side to play, go first. Otherwise, where is the chance? Still 15 minutes extra they have played on that day. See, maximum time, how we have to do, they have to bowl 84 overs or so. So they have to complete. For that only we have extended about 15 minutes. And otherwise, match result would have been a draw.
On the final day, in the morning, did you have any thoughts that this might yield a very strange result, or you went in saying that let's see how it goes? What were your thoughts that morning?
No, we cannot take a decision. How can we take a decision? And even Indian team also did not know the Border will declare the innings. See, 174 plus some few runs first innings lead, and it could have been 281 or so. These people have to score, and if Border has not declared, even if he has played half an hour, match would have been a draw.
Michael,
No
there is
full
right, sir.
full match decision would not have been there.
Michael, there is a lot of talk between these two tied tests, but the first tied test is seen as the greater tied test, not so much as the Madras tied test. Why is that? And Allan Border somewhere feels that they were a bit done in, that this should have been projected more. Probably the media wasn't all that great then. What are your thoughts while you were researching and writing the book?
Yeah, it's definitely the case. In Australia, there it's seen as when you say the tied test, everyone thinks of Brisbane, the West Indies, Australia in '60. And Madras is seen as the other tied test, I think partly it was that the match was played in India. It was not broadcast in Australia on radio or television. It happened in the middle of the night, Australian time. It was the middle of the football final season in Australia, where nobody's really thinking about cricket. And the deadline for newspapers to file their copy at stumps at the end of each day's play was the first edition in Australia. So they used to have to bash it out. So on the final over, there were several journalists who'd already written an India win, and they were trying to send that back to Australia, and then they went, hold the phone, hang on, maybe the result's going to change. So whereas the tied test in 1960 was broadcast on the ABC nationally, it was a brilliant series, that series, West Indies, Australia. So many great players played in that series. The series in India in '86 then was rain affected, the next two tests, so it ended 0-0 with the one tied match. And quite frankly, I think Australian cricket was on its knees. The team that Border brought over, although they've become names that everybody knows, but Steve Waugh was in his fourth test match. David Boone was the next most experienced player. He played 11 matches after Border, so there was a team of kids. Whereas in 1960, that side was very well known in Australia. So I think that's probably why. And I think the guys who played in the match in '86, one of their comments was, I think it was David Boone or Border said, this story is ripe to be told again, because people didn't perhaps at the time appreciate its place in history.
WV, do you think a biopic could be, or a movie could be in the cans for a book like this, Borders Battlers?
I think it'll be a bit too late now. I don't think anybody is going to venture into that. But there are a couple of funny things that I remember with the test match, more than the entire events. A friend of mine was recording on video the first 4 days. On those days, there was no ambush marketing or whatever. So on the final day, he said, no, it's going to be a draw. So he didn't record it. And he's still kicking himself for it. And the other thing was that, I don't know, it was the third day, must be. Kapil Dev was batting on 30 odd. He came back. So he closed the dressing room door. He called for a team meeting. He's supposed to have had strong words. And he told his teammates, you guys are just playing the one-day mode because everybody is getting 30, 40 and got out. And so the next morning, Gavaskar normally never watches cricket. So we made it a point to go and watch to see what Kapil Dev was doing first up. First over, Steve Waugh comes in, bowls. Third ball over mid-on, 1 bounce, 4. Sixth ball over cover, 1 bounce, 4. And he went on to play an innings which has obviously been sort of overshadowed by the result of the game. I tell you, it was a fabulous innings. So at the end of the day's game, Sunny Gavaskar called for a team meeting. So he said, Skip, 24 hours ago you were telling us we didn't know what the difference was. But having watched you on the field, we still don't know what the difference is between one day and test cricket.
I must say, if I could just comment on that for a moment, that I don't know if it's always the case, but sometimes teams adopt the personality of their captains. And part of the reason for the title of this book is that battler is a sort of socio-economic term in Australia for people who are struggling. India was a contrast to that. it was almost the spirit of Kapildev was in them. That innings that Kapildev played changed that match 180 degrees. He came out and he played a Pirates innings, didn't he? It was like a World Cup innings. And India could have at any stage on that final day shut up shop and played for a draw, which is probably in their best interest, but they continued to go for it. And the story that Ravi Shastri tells is that when Kapildev was out on the last day, as he was walking off, and Ravi Shastri was coming out to bat, Shastri deliberately went around the sight screen so that their paths wouldn't cross, because he didn't want Kapildev to say to him, close the game down. In other words, they had all imbibed the spirit which Kapildev had from that 83 World Cup, that anything is possible for Indian cricket if we go for it. And I think that the contrast in the two teams seemed to me to come from the ethos of their captains.
You also mentioned in the book about the bravery of the courage of Ravi Shastri, because he could have tried to shut down the game because he was facing the bowler then, but yet he took a single. And in his mind's eye was this thought, which is mentioned again in the book by Ravi, that I felt Mani was good enough to hit the winning run. It did not happen. In hindsight, do you think that was a correct decision or something went wrong?
I don't know. All I know is that the Australians were left with their mouths open when it happened. They couldn't believe it. They had set up the field that Shastri was going to go for the two, and he went for a single, which they didn't expect. And then, of course, they started doing the maths, and they realised that the scores were tied at that point. If they got a wicket, it would be a tied test. And Shastri is quite clear on it. He'd spoken to Maninder Singh during the changeover, the over before, and he'd said, I'll go for the single, and I'll make the runs, and we will make sure that India doesn't lose first. That was his instinct, and then we'll go for the win. And he backed his, and it didn't come off, but he backed him, and it was an interesting. Again, it gets back to that personality and that spirit of it, because after the fourth day's play, Allan Border almost had to be talked into a declaration. His instinct was to bat for another hour on the fifth day and put the game right out of reach. And we know what happens so many times in Test cricket when that happens. The final day fizzles out and it becomes nothing. So he had to give some chance to India, which India took to their great credit. And Shastri seemed to be a part of that. And of course, earlier when Shastri was playing, and you may remember it, he hit a couple of sixes and he turned to the crowd and he was going like this. He was getting them stirred up. He said, and the crowd, the people were hearing about the coming ground was filling up. It was a tremendous atmosphere on a final day of a test.
Vikram Raju, sir, what happened after the match got over? Because again, the book says that Ravi Shastri came into your room, had a few words. But despite all of that, what were your thoughts? What would you like to share with us?
No, he didn't come to our umpire's room or talk to us, anything. But Australians, Mr. Simpson and the other gentleman, Mackenzie, I think, he came and told us it was very hot, how you managed the 5 days. That's what he asked. And that was the 100th match of the Sunil Gavaskar. And they were saying that was a very good match. Anyway, it ended in a tie. Okay, don't worry. That's all they said. Ravi Shastri did not come to us. If you want, you can.
Did you interact with the media after that? Did they ask you for any quotes?
No.
No? No. Can I ask you that as an Indian, how do you feel about that match? Did we lose it?
No. See, I don't want to say that India should lose the match or win the match, but it was a decision which has to be given, and I have given.
You gave it?
Yes. It was definitely a definite LBW decision. Ball did not touch the bat.
I agree,
that was,
sir.
I am sure.
You did your work with absolute honesty and professionalism.
Yes.
Later, maybe 6 months later, while thinking about the match, any thoughts that came in your mind?
Nothing like that. See, it was a good match for us, and everybody liked what the decision I have given, and they even today they say it was a good match for you, and it was a good decision, and India did not lose the match. It was a tie. That's all. That was the second tie in tests. Both the matches Australia played. That's what the people say. Nothing else. No comments about my decision.
WB, talking about that last over, a lot has been said, and we have two others with us also who are mentioning quite a bit about it. One is a chronicler. The other was one of the main players who triggered that decision. Any tactical mistakes India made in that last over, or the fact that the little master was celebrating his 100th test, and there was a lot of other positive things happening in the Indian mind. Like Michael also said, it was a great team, yet it was a tied match.
I don't think tactically there's anything to really discuss about or to try and say that could have been better. I think, like Ravi had his confidence in Maninder to get a single. I think it didn't happen. It's just sometimes it doesn't happen. And let's face it, second tie, it's happened in India, and Sunny's 100th test match. What more do you want? That's the way I would look at it.
Okay, what more do you want? Any questions from the audience? Is anyone interested?
Michael, my question is to you. Did you had chance to interact with Ravi Shastri anytime? Since he was at the other end, what he would have done on the last ball, what his decision would have been if he would have been umpire in place of umpire Raju?
I don't know what his decision would have been, to be honest, because the questions that were put to him was really about setting up that final ball, which was what was his thinking going into the final over, which we discussed, which his feeling was that he would go for it so that India couldn't lose, and set up the draw first, which became the tie. Rather than that, I'm not sure what he would have done. I suspect if he'd been facing that, probably India would have been celebrating a series win. But, he trusted his teammate and they thought through it. And I think the interesting thing for him, he's very clear in his thinking about it. There was no question about what the strategy was, which I admire given the length of the match and the exhaustion they must have faced. And I've got to tell you, I made a bit of a mistake in my interview with Greg Matthews, because I said to Greg Matthews, when you were lining up to bowl your last over, were you aware of the situation? What a stupid question. Of course he was aware. And he said, I was aware of it. He said, I knew history was in my hands, And I suspect Ravi Shastri was a bit the same. He was very much aware. The professional cricketers are really aware of what was going on. So I can't say what he would have done, but I suspect, as I say, I think it would have been an India series win if he'd have been facing.
Next, please.
Hello, sir.
Go ahead.
My question is for Vikram Raju, sir. Sir, this side.
No, okay. She's asking a question.
Oh, sir, the question is, did Maninder Singh pay you a visit after the match?
He has visited several times. In Delhi only I have met him. And he did not comment on anything about the decision.
And Michael, one question from you. How open were the players from both the sides when when you had this idea of writing the book? Were they clear with their thoughts and they were ready to open about everything, the inside story and everything?
Yeah, I found them really good. They were happy to talk about it. I think they understand their place in history and time has passed. It was interesting too, sometimes piecing it together, because you have the match reports from the time, and often things are said there which later people can't remember saying, and then 20 years later they may have, and it's been documented along the way. There have been a lot of anniversary pieces as well. So in many respects, a lot of it was finding the fragments of what people have said and what has happened and bringing them together and confirming them. Sometimes people just can't remember, as is a trick. And what I used to say to people in the interviews was, I can look after all the forensic stuff. I can get the scorecard and I can get the quotes and everything else and the times. What I want from you is the emotion and the feelings, and don't worry about how many runs you scored in how many minutes. Let's not worry about that. We can figure that out later. It's really just finding the stories and the emotions and what's strongest. And sometimes the players who are the best are the ones who aren't necessarily the stars, because Kapil Dev or somebody may have been interviewed 1,000 times about the match. And for example, Michael Valletta, who didn't play in the game but was an extra fielder for Australia, was really interesting because he was an observer of the game, who was in the rooms, who really saw what was going on behind the scenes, had really never been asked about it before. So I found those interviews in many respects quite a lot more rewarding than interviewing some of the stars, who by their nature tend to just give the same answers again.
So taking that forward, who was the toughest player to write about and to interview, and the easiest? I mean, you interviewed for the book.
Well, I'll tell you one of them who's both, who was the trickiest to get and the most difficult to interview, but the most interesting and easiest to write about, was Greg Matthews. Because Greg's a differently wired person. You know, he's a tremendous character, but he dances to his own beat. So he's a very different guy. You know, he's bowling in a cap, he's wearing a jumper. And in many respects, early in his Test career, he was a bit of an outsider in the Australian team because he didn't fit into the culture. Now, he is also, as a result of that, he's quite difficult to find and difficult to talk to. But I found some time to get to him, and I previously mentioned this stupid question I'd put to him, very naive question, you know, did you know what was happening in the last over? He then reenacted the entire over, where he plays the bowler, the batsman, the fielder, the umpire. He does everything. And he speaks in this language, he uses all sorts of funky language, and, you know, he says, oh, you know, so-and-so, Steve Waugh badly misfielded it, and he races and he picks up the ball like he's misfielded it, and then he gives the umpire a signal. He performed it. And at the end of it, you know, you look at your notebook, you haven't actually written anything down because it's like a visual ceremony, and then he'll walk off. That's the end of, you know, that's it. You've got all you need to know. So he was fantastic to write about because he was so interesting, but it was like he teased you with information of what he had. So he was the most interesting, I think.
Next, please.
Hi, Michael. I have a question for you. It's actually related to what Raman sir, just said, that what is cricket about without a few, you know, umpiring errors here and there. That's a part of the game. Cricket has always given second chances. For example, you are taken out of the attack after bowling 2 beamers. You are given 2 warnings for running on the pitch. So to give the same kind of liberty to the umpires, the DRS was introduced. So in your opinion, do you think that the DRS has actually changed the way umpires go about making their decisions? A. And B, can there be workload management for umpires as well, like it is with Mitchell Stark and Jasprit Bumrah and Virat Kohli? Do they also need, you know, resting and rotation in between, given the pressures of international cricket?
Well, in answer to your second question, I think for sure, I think everybody needs that, and I would think being fresh would be a help. Your first question is good. I think I don't know for sure, but it seems to me as an outsider looking on that umpires have slightly less authority now than they used to. And I relate back to a story in the 1970s in Australian cricket, which was fairly robust. And Ian Chappell used to have this theory that the umpires ran the game. Now, Ian had a few blues with him, let's be sure. But his point used to be, if an umpire talked to him and told him something, he would say, you run the game, I'll run my team. And he saw that demarcation. And he, you know, that was the way cricket was then. Now, sometimes for me as an observer of cricket, I see something that looks to me fairly obvious that was a run out perhaps. And they'll go to the replay. And I think that umpires perhaps would rather say, I'll just make sure because I don't want my authority eroded. And perhaps the DRS can be a bit like that as well. But in terms of umpiring, I suspect it's raised the standards. And we were talking before about the reputation that Indian umpires perhaps had at the time, which may or may not have been warranted. But let's not forget that India in 85's really got some rough umpiring decisions at the MCG in Melbourne from Australian umpires that probably cost them that home series. And the English often say that they didn't get an LBW at the Gabba for about 35 years. So, you know, those things may be exaggerated. But what I'm getting at is that it was not unique to the subcontinent, the questions of touring teams and what decisions they were getting. And any way you can improve that through DRS or neutral umpires seems to me to be better.
Before the next question, Vikram Raju sir, would you like to comment on the standards of umpiring today? Has that been diluted through DRS or the third umpire now even officiating on the no ball rule?
Actually, now the New Zealand and England match, neutral umpires were only there, but after they did not ask the DRS third umpire for consultation when the wide was given in the World Cup. See, what is the use of having the DRS? Without that, they could have done it, no? But with that only, they did not consult. and gave a decision, and England favored and won the match, won the World Cup match. This is the first time England won the World Cup. So what do you say about that? How do you feel? Even with the DRS, decisions were not correct. And match was in favor of England only because of the decision. And can we comment on that? Why they did that? Because all these things, even with the DRS, it is happening. That should, and whoever, wherever the neutral umpires are there, with DRS, if the mistake is done, who will be blamed? See, that also should be verified.
So WB, how does the world adjust to technology? More and more of it is being used, will be used, but as sir is saying, that mistakes are still happening.
Mistakes will happen, technology will be used more and more. Somewhere it has to sort of make everything efficient and effective seamlessly. The day when that happens, I think everybody is going to be happy.
Next question, please.
Hello, sir. My question for you is that as you have seen the changes in trends of umpiring, so is that day near when artificial intelligence is going to take the place of umpires on the field?
Artificial decisions, how can
That is for you, sir. He's asking about that, is the day not far away when artificial intelligence will take over all umpiring decisions?
No, see, that should be, before posting the umpires, they should also consult, all the three should be met together and decide what is to be done and how they have to follow up. And when the consultation is done, why they are consulting, all this to be verified. And then only it comes all right. Otherwise, a lot of mistakes will definitely happen. Without earlier days, DRS was not there. Still, people used to comment. And though the matches were played in a good, true spirit, still they used to comment. And umpires were definitely better compared to now with the DRS. That you can also follow up whenever the matches are seen. And World Cup only it happened. And of course, that is purposely done or not, we are not bothered. See, when things go like that, then what do you say? Because posting people have done a mistake, they may say later. That should not be. Because on the field, umpires only consult when they have got doubt. Otherwise, sometimes batsmen also ask DRS for catches and run out, all this. That how can you say from the pavilion? And even the spectators cannot say what is happening there on the field. And only those people who will be watching on the TV, they will say what the decision they give, these people will also accept.
Right. Next one, please. Any more questions? No? Okay, so we bring to an end this session. I would like Michael Sexton to hold up his book and release it here in India. We wish him all the best. I have read the book. I would seriously request you to have a read. It's like a thriller. It's a terrific book, and it chronicles a very important moment in history. We are very grateful to Vikram Raju sir for being here, for being so candid to WV as always, and to Michael Sexton for having come all the way down from Australia with his book. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Where's Michael?
Thank you.
Can you hold up your book?
Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
We'll do that.
Okay, there we go.
Come on, ladies and gentlemen, big hand.
All the best, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Sir, come.
Sir, please. Sir, kindly hold.
No. Okay.
All the best, Michael.
Thank you so much, Michael. I think everybody is
Thank you
really
very
keen to
much,
read
sir.
your book. Thank you very much once again.
Nice meeting, sir.
Lovely pleasure to meet you.
Yes.
We need a bigger hand, everybody. Come on. So that's the cover launch of The Winning Sixer by W.V. Raman. And we wish him all the very best from all of us here at the Kamra Sports Literature Festival. And
Done?
I'll request WV to have a quick chat with me regarding his book because he's here, so let's take advantage of that. So, WV, tell us, it's called The Winning Sixer, and it's not really about cricket?
It's not really about cricket. What I've done is I've drawn the sporting incidents and their lives and sporting personalities and drawn parallel to leadership and life skills because over a period of time, having been involved in coaching various teams and seeing youngsters at various groups, I feel there's a need for them to allow them to evolve themselves. And leadership is something that is sought after even by the employers these days. So I thought this will be a good slant using sporting icons and sporting incidents.
Who is this meant for? Is it purely for sports people or people from the corporate world can learn quite a bit, aspiring MBAs?
Primarily what I'm trying to convey is that there's a leader in each one of us. So I'm trying to draw people's attention to it and I'm trying to tell them, unleash the leader in you. Because it's not necessary for somebody to have a post like a prime minister or a CEO or a chief minister or whatever, because leadership is required at all levels and there is a need for everybody to own up the responsibility in whatever it is that they are doing. So that's the basic essence of being a good leader. So which means that it's basically for people who are not only sports lovers, it's also for business managers and people who are looking at making careers.
I remember when India won the World Cup under Dhoni, Economic Times devoted about 2 or 3 pages on the managerial principles of cricket, which can be implemented in corporate boardrooms. What can we expect like that from this? And what were your thoughts when you wrote this book?
See, there are a lot of things pertaining to leadership that can be learned from what people see on the sports field. Yes, they all enjoy, they see the movement, they see the spectacle on the field, they really relish it. But what happens is, there's a lot of things that can be gleaned out of sporting incidents that's being missed out is what I feel. Here I've written a thing about what it constitutes to be a leader and what are the attributes that you see in a good leader like communication, decision making, being a giver and also being somebody who mentors and basically, I'm trying to say that a good leader needs to be a good team player first, which means it's not about you wanting to be in control. A good leader is never in control. So along those lines, I've written about the various attributes that you see in a good leader and also the subsets of each attribute.
When is the book likely to be released?
In 3 weeks' time. I'm planning to release it in the middle of Jan. Hopefully, it'll be interesting.
It should be interesting. Good luck to you for this book. Sandeep and I, we were having a chat. Maybe we'll try and do a Delhi release here. And see you soon. All the best.
That'll be nice. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the offer, Arup. We'll think about it.
And all the best with your coaching stint.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Concerned.
Thanks.
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Raman. Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. And ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to take a short break and I would request everybody to get back at sharp 5:30 because we have something really, really exciting that awaits you. We're going to have the first ever Sports Book Awards, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it absolutely right. The first ever Sports Book Awards, and I would request everyone to kindly come back at 5:30 p.m. for the same. Thank you once again.